The cream-colored wedding dress lay crumpled on the wooden floor of the small church in Rico, Colorado, and Eleanor Pierce stood frozen at the altar in her undergarments and corset, her face burning with humiliation as the echo of Charles Whitmore's cruel words still rang through the building like a death knell. "I cannot marry a woman of such unfortunate proportions," Charles had announced loudly enough for every assembled guest to hear, his voice dripping with disdain as his eyes raked over Eleanor's curves with obvious disgust. "You have deceived me with your letters and that single photograph. I expected a wife, not a woman who clearly indulges far too freely at the dinner table. I will not be shackled to someone so fat." The year was 1883, and Eleanor had traveled all the way from Philadelphia to this remote mining town nestled in the San Juan Mountains, answering Charles's advertisement for a mail-order bride. They had corresponded for 6 months, and his letters had been filled with promises of a good life, a comfortable home, and genuine affection. She had been honest in her descriptions, had sent him a photograph that showed her figure clearly, and he had written back with enthusiasm, claiming she was exactly what he desired in a wife. But now, as she stood trembling in the small wooden church with its rough-hewn pews and simple cross, Eleanor understood that Charles Whitmore was a liar and a coward. The congregation sat in stunned silence, their faces reflecting shock, pity, and in some cases, barely concealed satisfaction at witnessing such a dramatic scandal. Eleanor's hands shook as she bent to retrieve her dress, her dark auburn hair falling forward to hide the tears streaming down her cheeks. "I paid for your passage here," Charles continued, his thin face twisted with anger. "Consider that payment enough for wasting my time. Find your own way back to wherever you came from." With those final words, he turned on his heel and strode down the aisle, his boots echoing on the wooden floorboards. The church door slammed behind him with a finality that made Eleanor flinch. She clutched her dress to her chest, wanting nothing more than to disappear into the mountains surrounding this God-forsaken town. "Everybody out," a deep voice commanded from somewhere near the back of the church. "Give the lady some privacy and some dignity, for God's sake." Eleanor looked up through her tears to see a tall man standing in the last pew, his weathered cowboy hat in his hands. He had sun-bronzed skin, dark hair that touched his collar, and eyes the color of aged whiskey. His face was angular and strong, with a few days' worth of stubble shadowing his jaw. He wore dusty trail clothes and a gun belt, marking him as one of the many cowboys who drifted through Rico following work on the various ranches that dotted the valley. The congregation slowly filed out, some women casting sympathetic glances at Eleanor while others whispered behind their hands. The Reverend, an elderly man named Pastor Morrison, approached Eleanor hesitantly. "My dear, I am so terribly sorry," he said softly. "You are welcome to stay in the church as long as you need. I will have my wife bring you some tea." "Thank you," Eleanor managed to whisper, her voice hoarse from crying. The cowboy remained in the back pew even after everyone else had left. Eleanor struggled to put her dress back on, her fingers fumbling with the buttons that ran down the back. She could not reach them all, and frustration mixed with her humiliation until she wanted to scream. "Madam, if you would permit me," the cowboy said, approaching slowly as though she were a frightened horse. "Those buttons look difficult to manage alone." Eleanor's first instinct was to refuse, but practicality won out over pride. She turned her back to him, holding her hair up and away from the buttons. His fingers were surprisingly gentle as he worked the small buttons through their loops, and he maintained a respectful distance. "Thank you," Eleanor said when he finished, turning to face him. Up close, She could see that he was perhaps 30 years old, with fine lines around his eyes from squinting into the sun and a small scar above his left eyebrow. "Name's Logan Lawson," he said, extending his hand. "And I want you to know that Charles Whitmore is the biggest fool I have ever had the misfortune to encounter. He was a fool to speak to you that way, and he was a fool to walk away. You are beautiful to me, madam, and I have not got any right to say that to you having just met, but it needed to be said after what that snake put you through." Eleanor stared at him, certain she had misheard. No man had ever called her beautiful, not even her own father. She had always been the sturdy one, the solid one, the daughter with child-bearing hips and a frame built for hard work rather than delicate drawing rooms. Her figure was full and rounded, with ample curves that fashionable society deemed excessive. She had made peace with her body years ago, but Charles's words had reopened old wounds she thought had healed. "You do not have to say kind things out of pity," Eleanor said, her voice steadier now. "I know what I am." "You are a woman who deserves better than Charles Whitmore," Logan said firmly. "And I am not saying kind things out of pity. I am saying them because they are true." Eleanor studied his face, searching for any sign of mockery or deception, but found only sincerity. His whiskey-colored eyes held hers without wavering, and something in her chest loosened just a fraction. "I do not know what I am going to do," Eleanor admitted. "I have no money to return to Philadelphia. I used everything I had for the journey here. I have no family there anymore anyway. My parents died last year within months of each other." "You have any skills?" Logan asked. "Can you cook, so keep accounts?" "All of those things," Eleanor replied. "I managed my father's household after my mother passed. I can read and write and do figures. I worked in a textile factory for 2 years as well." Logan nodded thoughtfully. "Rico needs a school teacher. The previous one left last month to get married and moved to Denver. The pay is not much, but it comes with a small house and enough to live on. The town council has been looking for someone qualified. They would not hire me after this scandal," Eleanor said bitterly. "I am now the woman who was rejected at the altar." "They will hire you if I vouch for you," Logan said. "I own a ranch about 5 miles outside of town. It is not much yet, just me and 2 hired hands, but we run cattle and supply beef to Rico and a few other nearby towns. People here listen to me because I pay my bills and keep my word." "Why would you help me?" Eleanor asked. "You do not know me." Logan was quiet for a moment, turning his hat in his hands. "I know what it is like to be judged unfairly. I know what it is like to be dismissed because of something beyond your control. And I meant what I said, madam. You deserve better than what happened here today." Eleanor felt fresh tears prick her eyes, but these were different from the tears of humiliation she had shed earlier. "I do not know how to thank you." "No thanks needed," Logan said. "Let me talk to the town council. In the meantime, you can stay at the boarding house. I will cover the cost until you get the teaching position sorted out." "I cannot accept charity," Eleanor protested. "It is not charity. Consider it an investment in Rico's future. This town needs educated children, and you need a place to live. Everybody wins." Eleanor wanted to argue further, but exhaustion crashed over her like a wave. She had been traveling for nearly 2 weeks, had endured the most humiliating experience of her life, and now stood in a church in a town where she knew no one except a cowboy who seemed too good to be true. "All right," she finally said, "but I will repay you once I start earning money." "Fair enough," Logan agreed. He offered her his arm. "Let me walk you to the boarding house. Mrs. Fletcher runs it, and she is a kind woman who will not pester you with questions." Eleanor took his arm, grateful for the support. Her legs felt shaky and her head ached from crying. They left the church together, stepping out into the bright Colorado sunshine. Rico spread out before them, a collection of wooden buildings clinging to the mountainside. The town had sprung up following the discovery of silver in the surrounding peaks, and it had the raw, unfinished quality of a settlement still finding its footing. The boarding house was a two-story structure painted white with green shutters. Mrs. Fletcher, a plump woman in her 50s with graying blonde hair, greeted them at the door. Logan spoke quietly with her for a moment while Eleanor stood on the porch, and money changed hands. Mrs. Fletcher's expression shifted from curiosity to compassion as Logan explained the situation. "You poor dear," Mrs. Fletcher said, taking Eleanor's hand. "Come inside. I have a lovely room on the second floor with a view of the mountains. Logan, you are a good man for helping this young lady." "Just doing what is right, madam," Logan said. He tipped his hat to Eleanor. "I will come by tomorrow after I speak with the town council. Get some rest." Eleanor watched him walk away, his long stride carrying him quickly down the street. She felt as though she had fallen into some strange dream where humiliation and kindness mixed in equal measure. Mrs. Fletcher led her upstairs to a clean room with a brass bed, a washstand, and a small writing desk positioned near the window. "I will bring you some supper in a bit," the landlady said. "You look like you could use some quiet time." After Mrs. Fletcher left, Eleanor sank onto the bed and finally allowed herself to cry properly. She cried for her naivety in believing Charles's letters, for the cruelty of his rejection, for the death of her parents and the loss of the only home she had ever known. But she also cried with a strange sense of relief. She had been so focused on escaping Philadelphia and the painful memories there that she had not stopped to consider whether marrying Charles was truly what she wanted. His letters had been proper and correct, but never warm. There had been no real affection in his words, only a transactional quality that she had tried to ignore. As the sun set behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, Eleanor washed her face and changed out of her wedding dress into a simple calico dress she had packed in her trunk. Mrs. Fletcher brought up a tray with beef stew, fresh bread, and apple pie. Eleanor discovered she was ravenous and ate everything, surprised by her own appetite after such an emotional day. That night, she lay in the unfamiliar bed listening to the sounds of Rico settling down for the evening. Dogs barked in the distance, someone played a fiddle in one of the saloons, and the wind whistled through the peaks surrounding the town. Despite everything, Eleanor felt a small spark of hope kindle in her chest. Maybe this disaster was actually an opportunity. Maybe Logan Lawson really could help her build a new life here. The next morning, Eleanor woke to sunlight streaming through the window. She dressed carefully in her best day dress, a dark blue wool with modest trim, and pinned her auburn hair up in a neat bun. She had just finished when Mrs. Fletcher knocked on her door. "You have a visitor, dear. Mr. Lawson is downstairs." Eleanor's heart jumped nervously as she descended to the boarding house parlor. Logan stood by the fireplace, looking much the same as yesterday except he had shaved and wore a clean shirt. He smiled when he saw her, and she noticed he had a dimple in his left cheek. "Good morning, Miss Pierce. I spoke with the town council this morning and they would like to meet with you. If you are feeling up to it, we can go now." "I am ready," Eleanor said, more confidently than she felt. The meeting took place in the assay office, which also served as the unofficial town hall. 5 men sat around a large table covered with maps and mining reports. Logan made introductions. There was Samuel Garrett, who owned the general store, Dr. Henry Walsh, the town physician, James Thornton, who ran the largest mine in the area, Robert Chen, who owned the Lucky Dragon restaurant, and Pastor Morrison from the church. "Miss Pierce," Samuel Garrett began, Logan has told us about your unfortunate circumstances and has also vouched for your character and qualifications. We understand you have education and experience in household management. Yes, sir, Eleanor replied. I completed 8 years of formal schooling in Philadelphia, which was quite extensive for a woman. I read Latin and can do mathematics through algebra. I have taught Sunday school and have experience managing complex household affairs. Can you maintain discipline? James Thornton asked bluntly. Some of these mining families, their children can be rough. I believe in firm but fair discipline, Eleanor said. Children respond well to clear expectations and genuine interest in their education. I would not tolerate disrespect, but I would also make sure each child felt valued and capable of learning. The men asked her several more questions about curriculum, her views on education for both boys and girls, and whether she could handle the isolation of a small mountain town. Eleanor answered each question honestly, feeling her confidence grow as she spoke. These men seemed genuinely interested in finding a good teacher rather than gossiping about yesterday's scandal. Finally, Pastor Morrison spoke. Miss Pierce, I want to apologize again for what happened in my church. It was a disgrace, and Charles Whitmore has shown himself to be a man of poor character. However, I must ask whether you feel you can command respect in this town given the circumstances of your arrival. Eleanor met his gaze steadily. Pastor, I did nothing wrong yesterday. I was honest in my correspondence with Mr. Whitmore. He was the one who behaved dishonorably. I will not apologize for his failings or allow them to define me. If the people of Rico judge me based on his actions rather than my own, then perhaps this is not the right place for me. But if they judge me based on how I teach their children and contribute to this community, I believe I will earn their respect. A smile tugged at Logan's lips, and she saw approval in his eyes. The council members looked at each other and nodded. Well said, Miss Pierce, Dr. Walsh declared. I believe we have found our teacher. The position pays $40 a month plus the use of the schoolhouse residence. School is in session Monday through Friday, 8 in the morning until 3 in the afternoon. You will have approximately 20 students ranging from ages 6 to 14. Does this sound acceptable? Very acceptable, Eleanor said, hardly believing her good fortune. When would I start? Monday, Samuel Garrett said. That gives you a few days to settle into the house and prepare your lessons. Logan, can you help Miss Pierce move her things? Already planned on it, Logan replied. After the meeting concluded, Logan and Eleanor walked toward the schoolhouse, which sat at the edge of town with a small fenced yard. The building was simple but sturdy, painted white with a bell tower. Behind it stood a tiny house, barely more than a cabin with 2 rooms and a small porch. It is not much, Logan said as he unlocked the door, but it is yours. Eleanor stepped inside and looked around. The main room served as kitchen and living area combined, with a cast iron stove, a rough table with 2 chairs, and a rocking chair by a small fireplace. A curtained doorway led to a bedroom with a narrow bed, a wardrobe, and another small window. Everything was clean but bare, clearly unused for the past month. It is perfect, Eleanor said, and meant it. This was hers, earned by her own qualifications rather than handed to her as Charles Whitmore's wife. I cannot believe this is happening. Yesterday I was humiliated and homeless, and today I have employment and a home. Sometimes disasters lead us to where we were supposed to be all along, Logan said. He leaned against the doorframe, his arms crossed casually. I will bring your trunk from the boarding house and fetch you some basic supplies from the general store. You will need food, firewood, and such. You have already done so much, Eleanor protested. I am helping a neighbor, Logan said simply. That is what folks do out here. Besides, I plan on collecting payment. Eleanor's heart sank. She should have known there would be expectations. What sort of payment? Supper, Logan said, and that dimple appeared again. I am tired of my own cooking and the hotel restaurant. If you are half as good a cook as you claim, I would gladly trade firewood and supplies for a decent meal now and then. Relief flooded through Eleanor, followed by something warmer. That seems a fair trade, Mr. Lawson. Logan, he corrected. We are neighbors now, no need for formality. Then you must call me Eleanor. Eleanor, he repeated, and she liked the way her name sounded in his deep voice. I will be back in an hour with your things. After he left, Eleanor explored her new home more thoroughly. The house had clearly been built quickly and without much attention to detail, but it was solid and weatherproof. The previous teacher had left a few items behind, including dishes, a wash basin, and some worn books. Eleanor found a broom in the corner and began sweeping, finding comfort in the familiar task. True to his word, Logan returned an hour later with her trunk loaded in a wagon along with boxes of supplies. He had brought enough food for a week, including flour, beans, salt pork, coffee, eggs, and even fresh vegetables. There was also firewood, lamp oil, and candles. This is far too much, Eleanor said as Logan carried everything inside. You need to eat, Logan replied practically. And you cannot teach on an empty stomach. Consider it an advance on those suppers you promised me. Eleanor could not help but smile. You drive a hard bargain, Logan Lawson. They spent the afternoon organizing her belongings and making the little house livable. Logan proved surprisingly helpful, fixing a loose board on the porch and rehinging a cabinet door that hung crooked. Eleanor unpacked her trunk, hanging her few dresses in the wardrobe and arranging her precious books on a shelf. Logan improvised from spare lumber. As the afternoon wore on, they fell into an easy conversation. Logan told her about his ranch, how he had come to Colorado 5 years ago from Texas after his parents died in a yellow fever epidemic. He had worked as a cowhand for several years, saving every penny until he could buy his own land. His ranch was small but growing, and he had dreams of expanding it into one of the most successful operations in the valley. Eleanor shared her own story about growing up in Philadelphia as an only child, her father's work as a clerk in a shipping company, and her mother's long illness. She spoke about the loneliness after both parents died, how she had felt trapped in a city full of memories, and how Charles's advertisement had seemed like a chance for a fresh start. I suppose I should thank him in a way, Eleanor said as she arranged wildflowers in a jar on the table. If he had not been such a coward, I would be married to a man I did not love, trying to make myself smaller to fit his expectations. You should never have to make yourself smaller, Logan said quietly. The right man would appreciate everything about you exactly as you are. Their eyes met, and Eleanor felt her cheeks warm. There was something in the way Logan looked at her, an admiration and interest that made her pulse quicken. She turned away, busying herself with the flowers, unsure how to respond. I should get back to the ranch, Logan said, breaking the moment. I have cattle to check on, but if you need anything, send word. One of my hands comes into town most days. Thank you, Logan, for everything. He settled his hat on his head and smiled. See you soon, Eleanor. After he left, Eleanor cooked herself a simple supper and sat in the rocking chair as twilight fell over Rico. She felt exhausted but content, more at peace than she had been in months. As she rocked gently, she thought about Logan Lawson and his kind eyes, his steady presence, and the way he had called her beautiful when the rest of the world seemed ready to agree with Charles's cruel assessment. She told herself not to be foolish, that Logan was simply a good man helping someone in need. But as she climbed into bed that night, she could not stop thinking about him, and for the first time since leaving Philadelphia, she looked forward to tomorrow. The next few days passed in a blur of preparation. Eleanor spent her time planning lessons, organizing the schoolhouse, and exploring Rico. The town was rough around the edges, but had a frontier vitality that appealed to her. People greeted her on the street, and while some curious glances lingered a bit too long, most folks seemed willing to judge her on her merits as a teacher rather than as the jilted bride. She did not see Logan during those days, though she found herself listening for his voice whenever she was in town and looking for him among the cowboys who occasionally rode past. Mrs. Fletcher visited with fresh bread and gossip, reporting that Charles Whitmore had left Rico abruptly, heading to Durango. Eleanor felt nothing but relief at this news. On Sunday, Eleanor attended church service, walking into the building with her head held high despite the nervous flutter in her stomach. She chose a seat near the back and kept her eyes forward during Pastor Morrison's sermon about forgiveness and second chances. She wondered if he had chosen that topic specifically for her benefit. After the service, several women approached her. A young mother named Margaret introduced herself and her 3 children, all of whom would be Eleanor's students. An older woman named Mrs. Thornton, wife of the mine owner, invited Eleanor to the weekly ladies' social. By the time Eleanor left the church, she felt cautiously optimistic about her place in the community. As she walked home, she heard hoofbeats behind her and turned to see Logan riding up on a handsome bay horse. He dismounted and fell into step beside her, leading his horse by the reins. "Good sermon?" he asked. "It was about forgiveness," Eleanor replied, "though I am not sure I am ready to forgive Charles Whitmore." "Forgiveness is overrated," Logan said. "Some folks do not deserve it." Eleanor laughed, surprised by his bluntness. "I thought cowboys were supposed to be strong and silent." "I can be silent when the situation calls for it," Logan said with a grin, "but I have never seen the point in keeping quiet when speaking your mind is more honest." They reached her little house and Eleanor hesitated on the porch. "Would you like to come in for coffee? I made a dried apple pie yesterday and I have far too much for one person." "I would never turn down pie," Logan said, tying his horse to the porch rail. Inside, Eleanor busied herself preparing coffee and cutting generous slices of pie. Logan sat at the table, looking slightly too large for the small chair. The domestic scene felt comfortable and right in a way that made Eleanor's heart ache with longing for something she had never known she wanted. "How are you feeling about tomorrow?" Logan asked as he accepted the coffee she offered. "First day with the students." "Nervous," Eleanor admitted. "I've taught Sunday school, but that was only a handful of children and only for an hour. This is different." "You will do fine," Logan assured her. "You have more education than most folks in Rico and you care about teaching. That is what matters. Thank you for your confidence in me." Eleanor sipped her coffee, watching him over the rim of the cup. "Can I ask you something? Anything? Why did you really help me that day? You could have walked away like everyone else." Logan was quiet for a moment, his fork poised over his pie. "My mother was a big woman," he finally said. "Tall and strong and solid. She worked harder than any 2 men I ever knew, running our ranch in Texas while my father worked in town. People made comments sometimes, said unkind things about her size. I saw how it hurt her, even though she pretended not to care. When I saw Charles humiliating you, I thought about my mother and how she deserved better than the way some people treated her. You deserved better too." Eleanor felt tears prick her eyes. "She sounds like a remarkable woman." "She was," Logan said softly. "I wish you could have met her. She would have liked you." They finished their pie in comfortable silence, and then Logan reluctantly said he needed to return to his ranch. Eleanor walked him to the door where he paused. "Would you mind if I came by sometimes?" he asked. "Not for any particular reason, just to visit." "I enjoy talking with you." Eleanor's heart skipped. "I would like that very much." "Good." He smiled, and that dimple appeared. "Good luck tomorrow. You are going to be wonderful." That night, Eleanor lay awake thinking about Logan's story about his mother and the quiet pain in his voice when he spoke of her. She thought about how he had stood up for her without expecting anything in return, how he had been kind without being condescending. She was beginning to understand that Logan Lawson was a rare man indeed, and the feelings stirring in her heart were both exciting and terrifying. Monday morning arrived with cloudless skies and crisp mountain air. Eleanor dressed carefully in her most professional dress and walked to the schoolhouse with her heart hammering. 23 children waited in the yard, ranging from tiny 6-year-olds to gangly teenagers. They fell silent when they saw her, studying their new teacher with open curiosity. "Good morning," Eleanor said, projecting confidence she did not entirely feel. "My name is Miss Pierce, and I am your new teacher. I know some of you may have heard stories about me, and I want to address that directly before we begin. I came to Rico to start a new life, and things did not go as I planned. But sometimes our misfortunes lead us to where we are supposed to be. I am grateful to be your teacher, and I promise to work hard to give you the best education possible. In return, I expect respect, honesty, and effort from each of you. Now, shall we go inside and begin?" The children filed in quietly, their expressions ranging from skeptical to curious. Eleanor assigned seats based on age and ability, placing the youngest children in the front rows and the older students in the back. She spent the first hour assessing their current levels of learning and was dismayed to discover that several of the older children could barely read. But Eleanor threw herself into the work with determination. She organized the students into groups based on ability rather than age, created lessons that engaged different learning styles, and made sure to praise effort as much as achievement. By the end of the first week, the children seemed engaged and even enthusiastic. On Friday afternoon, Logan appeared at the schoolhouse just as Eleanor dismissed the students. He waited outside, leaning against the fence, and several children called out greetings to him as they passed. Clearly, he was well known and well liked in the community. "How was your first week?" he asked when Eleanor emerged. "Exhausting," she admitted, "but good. The children are bright and eager to learn. They just needed structure and attention." "I knew you would be perfect for this," Logan said. "I wanted to ask if you would like to come out to my ranch tomorrow. I thought you might enjoy getting out of town for a day and I could show you around the property. If you are interested, that is." Eleanor's immediate instinct was to say yes, but caution held her back. Would that be appropriate? A woman visiting a man's ranch unchaperoned. "I have 2 hands who live in the bunkhouse," Logan said. "And we would be working outdoors the whole time. Nothing inappropriate about it, but if you are uncomfortable, I understand." "No, I would love to see your ranch," Eleanor said quickly. "What time should I be ready?" "I will pick you up at 9. Wear practical clothes if you have them." The next morning, Eleanor dressed in her oldest day dress and sturdy boots, then felt foolish when Logan arrived in the wagon and she saw him taking in her outfit. "I do not have anything more practical than this," she said defensively. "You look fine," Logan assured her, "though we might need to get you some proper ranch clothes if you are going to visit regularly. That is, if you want to visit regularly." "I think I would like that," Eleanor said, climbing up beside him. The ride to Logan's ranch took about 40 minutes, following a winding trail that climbed into the foothills. The landscape was breathtaking, with tall pines giving way to meadows dotted with wildflowers. Logan pointed out landmarks and told her about the different ranches they passed. His property was nestled in a valley between two ridges, with a creek running through the middle. The ranch house was modest but well built, with a large barn, a corral, and a bunkhouse. Cattle grazed in the distance, and Eleanor could see two men working near the barn. "It is beautiful," Eleanor breathed. "It is home," Logan said simply. "Come on, I will introduce you to Jack and Miguel." The two ranch hands were friendly and respectful. Jack was a lanky man in his 50s with a gray beard, and Miguel was younger, perhaps 25, with dark hair and quick smile. Both tipped their hats to Eleanor and welcomed her warmly. Logan spent the morning showing Eleanor around the property. He explained his plans for expansion, where he wanted to build better fencing, and how he hoped to eventually add horses to his cattle operation. His passion for the ranch was evident in every word, and Eleanor found herself caught up in his vision. At midday, they ate lunch by the creek, sitting on a blanket Logan had brought. He had packed bread, cheese, apples, and cold chicken. The food was simple but delicious, made better by the fresh air and beautiful surroundings. "Thank you for bringing me here," Eleanor said, leaning back on her hands and turning her face to the sun. "I have been so focused on settling in and preparing lessons that I had not taken time to just breathe and appreciate where I am." "I come out here when I need to think," Logan said, lying back on the blanket with his hat over his face. "Something about the sound of the creek just clears your head." They stayed there for over an hour, sometimes talking and sometimes sitting in comfortable silence. Eleanor noticed small things about Logan. The way his hands were scarred from hard work, the laugh lines around his eyes, the way he seemed completely at ease in his own skin. She envied that ease, having spent so much of her life feeling like she did not quite fit anywhere. "Can I ask you something personal?" Eleanor said. "Sure," Logan replied, pushing his hat back to look at her. "Have you ever been in love?" Logan was quiet for a moment. "Once. Her name was Sarah. We planned to get married, but she died of consumption before we could. That was 7 years ago in Texas. I have not met anyone since who made me feel the way she did. Until recently." Eleanor's breath caught. "Recently?" Logan sat up, his expression serious. "I know it has only been a week since we met, and I know the timing is complicated given what you just went through. But I need to be honest with you, Eleanor. I think about you constantly. I find excuses to come into town hoping I will see you. When I am working, half my mind is wondering what you are doing and whether you are settling in all right. I am not expecting anything from you, and I understand if you need time or if you do not feel the same way. But I wanted you to know where I stand." Eleanor's heart was racing. "I feel it too," she admitted. "I tell myself it is too soon, that I am just grateful for your kindness, but it is more than that. When I see you, everything feels lighter. When you are not around, I find myself wishing you were. I have never felt this way before, not even close." Logan reached out and took her hand, his rough palm warm against hers. "We do not have to rush anything. We can take our time and see where this goes." "I would like that," Eleanor said softly. They sat hand in hand by the creek, the water gurgling over rocks and birds singing in the trees. Eleanor felt a profound sense of rightness, as though all the painful experiences of her life had been leading her to this moment, to this man, to this place. As the afternoon wore on, Logan reluctantly said they should head back. The ride to town seemed shorter than the morning journey, and Eleanor felt a pang of disappointment when her little house came into view. "Same time next week?" Logan asked as he helped her down from the wagon. "I will be counting the days," Eleanor replied. Logan grinned and tipped his hat before driving away. Eleanor went inside, her cheeks aching from smiling so much. She spun around her small kitchen like a girl, feeling foolish and wonderful at the same time. The following weeks fell into a pattern. Eleanor taught during the week, pouring her energy into her students and watching them flourish under her attention. She joined the ladies' social and made friends with several of the women in town, particularly Margaret and a young woman named Charlotte who ran the hotel. On Saturdays, Logan would pick her up and take her to his ranch, where they would spend the day working, talking, and simply being together. Eleanor learned to help with ranch chores, collecting eggs from the chickens Logan had recently acquired and helping Miguel repair fences. She was not particularly good at these tasks, but she approached them with the same determination she brought to teaching. Logan seemed to find her efforts endearing rather than inadequate, which was a novel experience for Eleanor. As autumn deepened and aspen trees turned gold on the mountainsides, Eleanor felt herself falling deeply in love with Logan. He was everything Charles Whitmore had not been: genuine, kind, and appreciative. He never criticized her appearance or suggested she eat less. In fact, he often brought her treats from town and praised her cooking enthusiastically. One Saturday in late October, Logan took Eleanor on horseback into the mountains to see a valley where he was thinking of grazing cattle next summer. They packed a lunch and spent the day exploring. The fall colors were spectacular, and the air had the crisp bite of approaching winter. They stopped to rest near a small lake surrounded by aspen trees. Eleanor sat on a fallen log while Logan checked their horses. When he returned, he sat beside her and took her hand. "Eleanor, there is something I need to say." She turned to look at him, seeing nervousness in his expression. "What is it?" "I love you," Logan said simply. "I have loved you for weeks now, maybe from that first day in the church when you stood there with your head held high despite everything. You are the strongest, smartest, most beautiful woman I have ever known. I know we have not been courting long by traditional standards, but out here in the West, we do not always have the luxury of lengthy courtships. I want to marry you, Eleanor. I want to build a life with you, have children with you, grow old with you. Will you be my wife?" Eleanor felt tears streaming down her face, but these were tears of joy. "Yes," she said. "Yes, I will marry you." Logan pulled her into his arms and kissed her for the first time. It was gentle and sweet and filled with promise. When they finally pulled apart, both were smiling. "I do not have a ring yet," Logan said. "I wanted to ask you first before I spent the money, but I will get you the nicest one I can afford." "I do not need a fancy ring," Eleanor said. "I just need you." They stayed by the lake until the sun began to set, making plans for their future. They decided to marry in the spring, giving Eleanor time to finish the school year and Logan time to prepare the ranch house for a wife. They talked about children and how many they wanted, about expanding the ranch and maybe building a bigger house someday. As they rode back to town in the gathering dusk, Eleanor marveled at how her life had changed in just a few short months. She had come to Rico broken and humiliated, and now she was engaged to a wonderful man who loved her exactly as she was. Charles Whitmore's cruelty had actually been a gift, freeing her to find real love. News of their engagement spread quickly through Rico. Most people were delighted, though a few busybodies made snide comments about how quickly Eleanor had moved on. Eleanor ignored them, too happy to care about gossip. In November, Logan took Eleanor to Durango to buy a ring and some household items for the ranch. It was Eleanor's first time leaving Rico since her arrival, and she enjoyed the adventure of traveling with Logan. They stayed in separate rooms at a respectable hotel, though Logan walked her to her door each night and kissed her goodnight in the hallway. The ring Logan chose was simple but beautiful, a thin gold band with a small diamond. He slipped it on her finger in the jewelry shop, and Eleanor thought it was the most beautiful thing she had ever seen. Winter arrived in early December, bringing heavy snows that sometimes made travel between town and ranch impossible. On those weekends when Logan could not reach town, Eleanor missed him terribly. They wrote letters to each other, and Logan would send them with Jack or Miguel when they came to town for supplies. Eleanor's students continued to thrive, and parents began commenting on how much their children had learned since she arrived. The town council praised her work, and Dr. Walsh told her she was the best teacher Rico had ever had. Eleanor felt proud of what she had accomplished and grateful for the opportunity. Christmas came, and Logan managed to get into town despite the snow. He brought Eleanor a beautiful shawl he had ordered from Denver, and she gave him a new pair of leather gloves she had carefully stitched herself. They attended Christmas service together, and afterward, Logan asked if she wanted to walk with him despite the cold. They bundled up and walked to the edge of town, where the mountains rose dark against the starlit sky. Logan pulled Eleanor close, wrapping his coat around both of them. 5 months ago, I watched a beautiful woman get humiliated by a fool, Logan said quietly. I never imagined that woman would become the love of my life. You have made me happier than I ever thought possible, Eleanor. You saved me, Eleanor replied. Not just that day in the church, but every day since. You showed me what real love looks like. They stood together in the snow, warm in each other's arms, and Eleanor sent a silent thank you to whatever fate had brought her to Rico. The winter months passed slowly. Eleanor taught, Logan worked his ranch, and they snatched whatever time together they could. They wrote letters constantly, and Eleanor kept every single one Logan sent her, tied up with a ribbon in her bureau drawer. In February, they began more concrete planning for their wedding. Eleanor wrote to a friend in Philadelphia asking for help with a wedding dress, and Logan started making improvements to the ranch house. He added a new bedroom, enlarged the kitchen, and built a proper front porch with a bench where they could sit together in the evenings. March brought the first signs of spring, and Eleanor felt her excitement growing. She would finish the school year in May, and they planned to marry in early June. Margaret and Charlotte helped her plan the ceremony and the small reception that would follow. One Saturday in April, Logan picked Eleanor up as usual for their day at the ranch. But instead of heading straight there, he drove to a different valley Eleanor had not seen before. "Where are we going?" she asked. "You will see," Logan said mysteriously. He stopped the wagon near a beautiful meadow with a stream running through it. Wildflowers were just beginning to bloom, and the surrounding mountains provided a stunning backdrop. "I have been thinking about buying this land," Logan said. "It is adjacent to my current property, and it would double the size of the ranch. But I wanted you to see it first, since it would be our ranch, not just mine." Eleanor climbed down from the wagon and walked through the meadow, imagining cattle grazing there and maybe a house built near the stream. "It is perfect," she said. "We should buy it." "Then we will," Logan agreed. He caught up to her and pulled her into his arms. "I want to build our future together, Eleanor. Every decision, every plan, I want your input and your ideas. This is not going to be a marriage where you just cook and clean while I make all the choices. We are partners." Eleanor kissed him, pouring all her love and gratitude into it. "Have I mentioned lately that I love you?" "Not in the past hour," Logan teased. "I was starting to wonder." They spent the afternoon exploring the new property, talking about possibilities and dreams. Logan had saved enough money to make a down payment on the land, and with the expansion, his ranch would become one of the most significant operations in the area. As May approached, Eleanor felt torn between excitement for her wedding and sadness about leaving her students. She had grown to love teaching, and the children had made remarkable progress. Several parents asked if she would continue teaching after marriage, but Eleanor explained that living at the ranch would make daily travel to town impossible, especially in winter. On her last day of school, the students and their parents organized a surprise party for her. They brought food and gifts, and several mothers cried as they thanked Eleanor for everything she had done for their children. Eleanor was deeply moved and promised to visit town regularly after her marriage. The week before the wedding, Eleanor's dress arrived from Philadelphia. It was ivory silk with delicate lace trim, far more beautiful than the dress she had planned to wear to marry Charles. Margaret and Charlotte came over to help her try it on, and all three women cried when they saw how lovely it looked. "You are going to be the most beautiful bride Rico has ever seen," Charlotte declared. The night before the wedding, Eleanor barely slept. She kept thinking about the journey that had brought her here, from the humiliation of being jilted to the joy of finding true love. She thought about Charles Whitmore and felt nothing but indifference. He had actually done her a favor, though she doubted he would see it that way. Her wedding day dawned clear and warm. Margaret and Charlotte arrived early to help Eleanor dress and fix her hair. They wove wildflowers into her auburn curls and helped her into the ivory dress. When Eleanor looked at herself in the small mirror, she barely recognized the radiant woman staring back at her. The ceremony was held in the same church where Charles had humiliated her, but this time the memory held no power over her. The building was decorated with wildflowers and pine boughs, and nearly the entire town had turned out for the wedding. As Eleanor walked down the aisle on Pastor Morrison's arm, she only had eyes for Logan. He stood at the altar looking handsome in a new suit, his face full of love and pride. When she reached him and took his hand, he whispered, "You are beautiful." The ceremony was simple and heartfelt. They exchanged vows they had written themselves, promising to love and support each other through whatever life brought. When Pastor Morrison pronounced them husband and wife, Logan kissed Eleanor thoroughly, causing some of the older ladies to gasp and many others to laugh. The reception was held at the hotel, with music, dancing, and more food than Eleanor had ever seen in one place. She and Logan danced together repeatedly, and Eleanor felt like she was floating. Jack and Miguel had come into town for the wedding, and both men congratulated Logan enthusiastically. As the evening wore on, Logan pulled Eleanor aside. "Ready to go home, Mrs. Lawson?" Eleanor smiled at her new name. "Yes, please." They said their goodbyes and climbed into the wagon, which Jack had decorated with ribbons and tin cans. The ride to the ranch seemed to take forever, but finally they arrived at what was now Eleanor's home. Logan had been busy. The house was spotlessly clean, and he had filled every available surface with wildflowers. A fire crackled in the fireplace, and candles cast a warm glow throughout the rooms. Eleanor walked through her new home with tears in her eyes, touching the curtains Logan had hung and the rug he had bought for the bedroom. "Do you like it?" Logan asked, suddenly uncertain. "I love it," Eleanor said. "I love you." That night they began their life together as husband and wife. Logan was gentle and patient, and Eleanor felt cherished in a way she had never experienced before. They fell asleep wrapped in each other's arms, and Eleanor thought she had never been so happy. The next morning, Eleanor woke to sunlight streaming through the window and Logan's arm draped across her waist. She carefully extracted herself and padded to the kitchen, planning to surprise him with breakfast. As she cooked, she heard him moving around in the bedroom, and then he appeared in the doorway, hair mussed and smiling. "I could get used to waking up with you here," he said, coming up behind her and wrapping his arms around her waist. "Good, because I am not going anywhere," Eleanor replied, leaning back against his chest. They spent their first days as a married couple settling into routines and learning each other's habits. Eleanor discovered that Logan sang while he worked, always off-key, and that he had a sweet tooth that rivaled any child's. Logan learned that Eleanor liked to read before bed, that she was ticklish on her left side, and that she made the best biscuits he had ever tasted. Summer arrived and the ranch thrived. Logan completed the purchase of the additional land, and they moved cattle into the new pastures. Eleanor learned more ranch skills, getting better at riding and even helping with branding, though she did not particularly enjoy that task. She started a large vegetable garden near the house and planted flowers everywhere she could. In August, Eleanor realized her monthly courses had not arrived. She waited another week to be sure before saying anything to Logan, but when the second week passed and she began feeling queasy in the mornings, she could not keep the news to herself any longer. She waited until after supper one evening when they were sitting on the porch watching the sunset. "Logan, I have something to tell you." He looked at her, sensing the importance of whatever she was about to say. "What is it?" "I am fairly certain I am with child," Eleanor said, watching his face carefully. For a moment Logan just stared at her, and then a huge smile broke across his face. "Really? We are going to have a baby, I think so. I should probably see Dr. Walsh to be certain, but all the signs are there." Logan pulled her into his arms, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe. "This is the best news," he said into her hair. "Eleanor, I am so happy." "So am I," Eleanor said, tears streaming down her face. "So am I." The next day they drove into town so Eleanor could see Dr. Walsh. He confirmed what she already knew. She was about 2 months along and could expect the baby in late February or early March. Dr. Walsh cautioned her about working too hard and told Logan to make sure she got plenty of rest. News of the pregnancy spread through Rico, and Eleanor received congratulations everywhere she went. Margaret, who was expecting her 4th child, gave Eleanor advice and handed down baby clothes. Charlotte organized a quilting bee to make blankets and clothes for the new baby. As autumn painted the mountains gold and red again, Eleanor marveled at how much had changed in a year. 12 months ago she had been a jilted bride with no prospects and no home. Now she was married to a wonderful man, living on a beautiful ranch and expecting their first child. It seemed almost too good to be true, yet here she was, living a life better than any she could have imagined. Winter came early that year, with the first major snowstorm hitting in late October. Eleanor was glad they had stocked up on supplies, because they ended up snowed in for nearly a week. She and Logan spent that time cozy inside, playing cards, reading aloud to each other, and making plans for the baby's arrival. As Eleanor's pregnancy advanced, Logan became increasingly protective. He would not let her lift anything heavy, insisted she rest every afternoon, and worried constantly about her health. Eleanor found it endearing even when it was a bit overwhelming. In January, Logan began preparing for the baby's arrival in earnest. He built a beautiful cradle from pine wood, sanding it until it was smooth as silk. He also made sure they had everything they might need, from blankets to diapers to tiny clothes. Eleanor knitted constantly, making booties and caps and sweaters in soft yarns. February arrived with bitterly cold weather, and Eleanor grew increasingly uncomfortable. Her back ached, her feet swelled, and she could not find a comfortable position for sleeping. But she never complained, too grateful for the miracle growing inside her. On a snowy night in late February, Eleanor's pains began. Logan immediately rode to Rico despite the weather to fetch Dr. Walsh and Margaret, who had agreed to help with the birth. By the time they arrived back at the ranch, Eleanor's contractions were coming fast and hard. Logan stayed with her throughout the labor, holding her hand and wiping her forehead with cool cloths. Dr. Walsh and Margaret worked efficiently, and just before dawn, Eleanor gave birth to a healthy baby boy. His first cries filled the ranch house, and Eleanor wept with joy and relief. "You did it," Logan said, his own eyes wet as he looked at their son. "He is perfect, Eleanor, just perfect." "Lucas," Eleanor said softly, touching the baby's tiny hand. "Can we name him Lucas?" "Lucas Lawson," Logan said, testing the name. "I love it." They spent the first days after Lucas's birth in a haze of exhaustion and wonder. The baby had Logan's dark hair and Eleanor's gray eyes, and he was healthy and strong. Logan proved to be a devoted father, getting up with Eleanor for nighttime feedings and changing diapers without complaint. Margaret visited often, bringing food and help. Charlotte came too, as did several other women from town. Eleanor appreciated the community that had embraced her, these women who had become true friends. As winter gave way to spring, Eleanor slowly regained her strength. Lucas grew and thrived, and Eleanor could not imagine loving anything more than she loved her little family. Logan was an amazing father, singing to Lucas in his off-key voice and carrying him around the ranch in a sling Eleanor had made. One evening in April, when Lucas was about 6 weeks old, Eleanor and Logan sat on the porch watching the sunset while Lucas slept in his cradle. Logan had his arm around Eleanor, and she leaned against his shoulder, feeling perfectly content. "You ever think about that day in the church?" Logan asked suddenly. "Sometimes," Eleanor admitted, "but when I do, I just feel grateful. Charles Whitmore did me the greatest favor of my life when he walked away. If he had not, I never would have found you." "I think about it too," Logan said. "I think about how close I came to not saying anything that day, to just walking away like everyone else. But something made me speak up. Maybe it was fate." "Maybe it was," Eleanor agreed. "Whatever it was, I am thankful for it every single day." As the years passed, Eleanor and Logan's life together grew richer and fuller. They had 3 more children, a daughter named Emma who was born 2 years after Lucas, twin boys named Samuel and Seth who arrived 2 years after Emma. The ranch prospered and expanded until it was one of the most successful in the region. Eleanor never went back to formal teaching, but she educated her own children and also held informal classes for ranch hands who wanted to learn to read and write. She became known throughout the valley as someone who would help anyone seeking education. Logan's ranch became known for quality cattle and fair dealings. He was respected throughout the community and served on the town council for several years, but his greatest pride was always his family. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Logan and Eleanor stood on the porch of their ranch house, which had grown considerably over the years to accommodate their expanding family. Their children played in the yard, Lucas now 9 years old and already showing signs of becoming a fine rancher like his father. 10 years, Eleanor mused. Sometimes it feels like just yesterday, and sometimes it feels like we have always been together. "I have loved every single day," Logan said, pulling her close. "Even the hard ones, especially the hard ones because we got through them together." "Do you remember what you said to me that first day?" Eleanor asked. "You said Charles was a fool and that I was beautiful to you." "I meant it then and I mean it now," Logan said firmly. "You are even more beautiful to me today than you were that day, if that is possible." Eleanor kissed him, still feeling the same flutter of excitement she had felt when they first met. "I love you, Logan Lawson." "I love you too, Eleanor Lawson. Forever and always." As the sun set over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Eleanor reflected on the unlikely journey that had brought her to this moment. She had come to Rico expecting one kind of life, and had instead found something far better. She had learned that sometimes the worst moments lead to the greatest blessings, that true love sees beauty where others see flaws, and that home is not a place but a person. She watched Logan swing Emma onto his shoulders while Lucas tried to corral the twins, and she felt her heart swell with love and gratitude. Charles Whitmore had called her too fat and walked away from their wedding, but Logan had seen past society's narrow definitions of beauty to the woman beneath. He had called her beautiful and meant it, had loved her exactly as she was, and had built a life with her that exceeded her wildest dreams. Eleanor placed her hand on her stomach, where another child was just beginning to grow. She had not told Logan yet, wanting to be certain first, but she smiled, thinking about his reaction when she shared the news. Their family would continue to grow just like their love. As darkness fell and stars began appearing in the vast Colorado sky, Eleanor called her family inside for supper. Logan caught her hand as they walked through the door together, and the look he gave her was full of love and promises kept. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, just as they had faced everything else. And Eleanor knew, deep in her soul, that she was exactly where she was always meant to be. She had found her home, her love, and her purpose in the mountains of Colorado, and she would never take a single moment of it for granted. The jilted bride had become a beloved wife and mother, and the cowboy who had defended her that terrible day had become the love of her life. It was, Eleanor thought as she kissed her children goodnight and climbed into bed beside her husband, a perfect ending that was really just a beautiful beginning. Their story was far from over, with decades of love and life stretching out before them. But it had started with one man's cruelty and another man's kindness, and Eleanor would be grateful for both for the rest of her days. As she drifted off to sleep in Logan's arms, Eleanor Pierce Lawson smiled, knowing that tomorrow would bring new joys, new challenges, and new reasons to be thankful for the day Charles Whitmore had called her too fat, and Logan Lawson had called her beautiful. Because sometimes, the greatest love stories begin with heartbreak, and the most beautiful journeys start with a single act of kindness from a cowboy who knew that true beauty has nothing to do with size, and everything to do with the size of one's heart. And they lived, loved, and thrived together for the rest of their days, raising their children to value character over appearance, kindness over cruelty, and love above all else. The ranch they built together stood for generations as a testament to what can grow from the seeds of compassion, and their story became a favorite tale told around fires in Rico, Colorado, about the teacher who was jilted and the cowboy who saw her true worth. It was a story about second chances, about finding love in unexpected places, and about the power of one person who refuses to stand by while injustice unfolds. Their life together was not always easy, but it was always filled with love, respect, and partnership. And for Eleanor and Logan, that was more than enough. It was everything.